just going down, and I knew this by way of having swum across the river up in there. You'd stub your toe out in the middle of the river. But he says it'd be a wonderful place to swim. Take the swim cage out and stake it out into this reef and be out in the middle of the river. He said, let's go out and take a look at it and see if it's still there and so on. And we did. We got a rowboat and we went out. And I don't know, rowboats, you don't like, they're metal row. These were metal rowboats. You don't like to walk on that or dent it up. And they have like grating or a deck plaque floor in them, lumber up over that. We found some boards to put in, and this was kind of a necessity on the way back. We got out and looked around and talked about it. Fun conversation, a very interesting time. It's enjoyable company. But anyway, coming back, it was a blustery day with the wind and wavy, and things were moving real good. And going out, I rowed the boat. Coming back, either the Pearson or the, what's the other consumer's boat? One of the two boats. Yeah, it was either the Lone Star or the Pearson was going upstream there and intersecting where we're coming across, and John says, don't worry, he said, that's a powered boat. It's their responsibility to make room for us. And then he picked up one of the planks out of the floor here, and he was paddling or helping me with the rowing, and kind of in between that he takes off his fedora hat and he's waving at the pilot. But I think it was so typical, and it ties in with particularly Ed's story, but kind of in general, this idea of outdoors camping and kids and so on. But it's so typical Hauberg, but it was a great experience.
Hi, my name is Richard Koenig, and when my mother passed away, I received all of her items, and one of them that I found was a Bible that John Hauberg wrote in and presented to her as in his Bible studies that he would teach Sunday school, and he gave all of his Sunday school students a Bible, and he signed it, and it would be about 100 years old now, and her name was at that time Alice Bicknell.
Important about that little river journey we had. He was no kid, man. This was in '52, and I'm not sure of what year he died, but I'm wondering if it was 3 years. He was 3 years from the end of his life when he was out there in a rowboat in the river in March, waving at the pilots.
Gilbert is laying out a bunch of photos that were made by John Hauberg. We have them at the Fort Barn Historical Society. They were glass negatives. They're around these tables, quite interesting if you want to see them.
Thank you.
A couple of things there. When Edward Sweeney Jr., or Teddy we called him as youngsters.
Call him that now.
He's Ed. I don't go by Edward anymore either. I'm Ed too. So anyway, when he was in town, and staying for a while with his grandfather, I'd be invited in and stay there too. So Teddy and I we'd make bow and arrows there out of the bushes there between the house and the garage. Then we'd have to go to the cook to get some string. We had just a grand old time there. My grandfather Lyford, who was married to John's sister Nora, fell down a hay chute and died just before the Depression, and then the bank closed there that our grandmother had her money in, and so they were quite desperate. So Uncle John, in order to help out, and Aunt Sue, they bought 150 acres or so, mainly of timber, which is still in existence today, and that had been pastured by Grandpa Lyford. But Uncle John said, no, we want to stop pasturing it now, and we want to get a new growth of timber going there. Well, we've managed that timber since, and thanks to him, there's some income there, and it's a very neat rolling timber. John Jr. built a home there in the corner of it overlooking the Mississippi and the creek that winds through there. It's just a beautiful tract. Had quite a few hikes there. And in that house we had a couple of Christmas hiking club deals there too. That was quite interesting. Well, anyway, Uncle John took my dad and I out from that house one day and showed us where two trees, they weren't too far apart, and they were probably about a foot in diameter each, and the one had a limb up about 4 feet, and it grew right through the other one. Not just kind of wrapped around, but it was just, I don't know quite how that all worked, but anyway, he knew that tree was there. He was always hiking around himself, looking and familiarizing himself with timber and what's going on. The fortunate thing about Uncle John was he was a wealthy fellow that had time and ingenuity to record history and do things for the communities. And one thing that I think's neat is the Loud Thunder Forest Preserve. Just the name Loud Thunder is pretty nice, I think, and that's quite a reserved for the public area. Linawack too, probably. But just all kinds of things. And then record these conversations that somebody was asking about that are over here. That's where I head to when I come down here and have time, is go look at those interviews. Quite a fellow.
I have something here. This was a memorial to John Hauberg, put together mainly, I think, by his son. And he included a letter. A Mr. Charles Thompson from the Elgin, Illinois YMCA had evidently written to him about how do you take a bunch of boys out with wagons or trucks and camp out and cook all your food out and all that. So this was John Hauberg's letter to him. I won't read the whole thing, but here he gives the description here of the cooking, and this was from 1920, and it's almost the same procedure used by the Black Hawk Hiking Club even today. It's that cook over the open fire. Have a big fire and let it burn till there's a good bit of coals. Set the bucket right in the midst of the fire. Peggy and I know all about that. It works. Same with frying pans. In the frying pan, you also fry eggs, bacon, fish, potatoes, etc., etc. In the buckets, you cook potatoes, beans, canned corn or peas, weenies, soups, coffee, etc. Have an extra bucket over the fire with just water in it, and one to wash dishes. We carry 3 buckets when there are 20 or more of us, more if we have 40 to 75 boys. We have taken 6 or 8 buckets then. You used to carry pans of different sizes to mix things in, but we've quit it. Don't let any dyspeptic tell you fried things aren't healthy, etc. Your hike boys have an appetite and a digestion like a corn shower. and they get fat on the above described diet. Then he says, naturally we use lots of bread. Don't fool with desserts. Don't try to set up a meal like Mother makes. It isn't at all necessary. Mother's meals are luxuries. A hiking boy doesn't need more than 1 vegetable, or a bunch of hot weenies, or a chunk of canned salmon plus a chunk of bread. Take a loaf and break it into about 5 or 6 pieces and a tin cup of good hot coffee. His appetite does the rest. And he finishes with, use a camera liberally. Let me know your progress. I like this sort of thing.
Been asked to tell something about John Hauberg. in person, the type of person that he was. When we went to eat at his house, and we were young, favorite foods, he did like chicken, fried chicken, yes, and ham, basic foods. I always know the table always seemed so formal that I thought, oh, I can't pick up, the chicken pieces and eat them by hand. That's where I learned to eat chicken with a knife and fork.
Talk into the mic.
And then when I'm with some of the grandchildren, and there are a few of them, John Hauberg Jr.'s daughter is close to a lot of us, and then on his daughter Catherine's children were, I'm closest to the oldest daughter, Susie, or Suzanne, named after her grandmother, and we're together often. We see, like Simpsons and I are going to be seeing Faye out in Seattle in July. I see Susie, who's about my age, quite often. We've done traveling together. But when we are together, we often reminisce about the old days and the fun we had at the house. One of the great experiences, and probably Ed and Kitty were out playing with airplanes or whatever. Well, inside, there is a great cedar chest on the 3rd floor with a lot of blankets in it. And the living room, if you've been in the house, was very large. We had more fun. We moved all the furniture around, gotten out all these blankets and draped them over the furniture to make little houses for ourselves. I mean, the living room probably never looked like that in the past, probably won't in the future. They thought it was a day when it was thought Mr. Hauberg would be gone much longer, because all of a sudden his daughter Catherine appeared with him, and she peeked in the room because she knew, she said, he to put this away as quickly as possible, because when he saw it, we knew, yeah, he was in trouble. He never said anything, but he just didn't really care for us to have all the furniture all around, all over and covered. And then also upstairs in the 3rd floor was, I think it's, I don't know if it's part of the cedar closet, a lot of old clothes. Maybe some of them are here. And there were times when we would dress up in the old clothing to parade around, and perhaps he was the one who took our pictures, I don't know, because he always had a camera hanging around him. I mean, that's why there are pictures everywhere. There was an experience with the grandson, Teddy, who loved airplanes and still does. He was making and sawing wood for an airplane, and he had set up a little sawhorse, but it was with one of the really good tables, and saw into that. I mean, there are a lot of little stories that could be told, but we loved playing in that house. The elevator was a great experience because the girl cousins could get into the elevator. We'd get some cookies and whatever else to drink, and if you got between floors and turned off the elevator, switched it off, then the boys couldn't get to us. We could just stay there and eat, and I mean, those were some of the great experiences that we had.
Cynthia has said a lot about this house. You're referring to the Hauberg Mansion on 24th
Right,
Street
yes.
in Rock Island,
Mhm.
the Hauberg Civic Center in Rock
Right.
Island.
And it was just a house to us. I think the first time I ever thought that he must be somebody important, because he was just an uncle to us, was when I was on a 9th grade at Edison School. You went to, that was your trip to Springfield. It was a hot day, and you always had to be dressed up, and you stopped at Dixon Mounds on the way home. Well, it so happened I think Assistant Superintendent of Schools, Virgil Helms, was with us. He'd been a principal before, but he also knew the Haubergs. If you know the Hauberg book, in Johnny Hauberg's autobiography, he tells of the story of catching his basketball coach after hours kissing the math teacher. And it turns out he said, well, they were engaged at the time. But anyway, when we were in this 9th grade at Dixon Mounds, Mr. Helms wanted me to come with him. Well, so important. Well, I was introduced to the head of Dixon Mounds as being a niece of John Hauberg. That was, again, apparently that was a big deal. I was rather embarrassed by the whole thing. I was shy in those days, but to find out, okay, well then, we must be somebody important. Mr. Helms certainly wanted to make sure that a relative of John Hauberg's was in the area or was actually.
When I was a senior in high school, we borrowed John's truck, which most of you would know as the, yeah, the Black Hawk Hiking Club truck. We borrowed it to make a float. And we did all the work in the garage under the supervision of, what's his name? Charlie? Yeah.
Oh, Charlie.
Yeah, the caretaker, the one who did all the work. And so we decorated it with, crepe paper, and we were playing Davenport for that homecoming. And so our big theme was crossing the Iowa line. We thought we were so clever. And so we just had to drive that truck over to Davenport and go down Second on our way back to 23rd Street Hill. And of course, I did not know how to shift because, well, my father had a car, you didn't have to shift. So one of my girlfriends, whose dad was still driving an old pre-war car, drove it. But we did not realize that there was, an extra gear. So by the time we got it back up to John's, it was kind of smoky.
Microphone up.
And so we had to, clean everything up and get it. And then later on one time when I was over there, he let me know we stripped the gears, or what had we done? We had done something to the truck, but he hadn't told John he'd had it fixed. But here we were, this bunch of girls driving, and it is a very large truck.
It was sometime in the 30s. This hike was on Rock River. It was 5 below zero. We gathered at what was once called Prince Hall and walked on down to the mouth of the Mississippi and the Rock River. And on that hike, one of the men, William McLean Stewart, who was always very pious and so on, he had some kind of a stick, I don't know where he found it, and some string and a pin on the end of it, and he broke the ice and went fishing. And when it came time for us to eat, we had, of course, the old black buckets, and Mr. Hauberg got some water out of the river, and he made potato soup. Now, he had potatoes, I don't know how many pockets that old overcoat had, but he had a hatchet, which he peeled the potatoes with, and the potatoes were in his pockets. And I tell you, that was the best potato soup I ever had. It was so cold. That 5 below zero was something else, so.
Well, I can vouch for that. The potato soup hike still goes on. It's a January meeting, and in the middle of winter, they have a potato soup hike, and I was on it like 2 or 3 years ago.
Did you get potato soup?
Huh? It was potato, yeah. People bought 4 different varieties of it, but they did have potato soup.
Still use Euro
No.
A woman named Little Better, who was built approximately like a firefly. And she would, on at least 2 occasions, maybe 3, she was walking out on the ice, and she fell in. She fell in right to here, up to her. Yeah. Lil had a gift that way, and she was kind of built for somebody who would fall in a river right up to her shoulder, not in, because she never went under. Then we have to pull her out, dry her off, and usually send her home. But the number of hiking club stories that you could generate, most of them including J.H., because he was usually on the hikes, is just innumerable. And I was only dealt with it between the ages of 5 and about 21. So the people who were, like my aunt, who were in it forever, from 1921 until her death, I think, they could probably generate a lot more. Now, one thing, though, I do remember about Archie Allen, not that I ever went there, but that they had canoes. They were called war canoes. They had at least place for at least 8 paddlers. No more, because they'd be, 8 paddlers side by side, 2 by 2 by 2. And when you got, say 8 to 10 maiden ladies, of which the hiking club had a superfluity, And you got them in there paddling. It was just a sight. I mean, they'd go like blazes down, you know, and you couldn't keep up with them. You'd say, let's go, whoop, and away, off go to work, and it was at least 3, maybe 4, I forget. But they came from Archie. I often wonder whatever happened to those canoes. I presume they were scuttled long ago or ceremoniously burned or something, but they were a marvelous mode of communication.
I have gone on more than 100 big hikes. And big hike, as many of you know, was once a year in the summertime. And it was J.H., as I lovingly called him, was on most all of those big hikes. Big hike was a 2-week trip to some place in the United States, usually west, but we also went east on occasion. Now, these were camping trips. We rode in the back of open stake-body trucks, and we sat on what we then called our bedrolls, although today we call them sleeping bags. But they were all piled up around the edges of the trucks. Then we had carts, that kind of crates that held our little luggage, you know, little hand luggage in the middle. So if you needed to get sunglasses or a motorcycle helmet to keep your hair from blowing, or a bandana to cover your face to keep the wind out of your eyes, you could get in your little satchel, which was in this crate down the middle. We were all sitting around the edges. Now, J.H. went on almost all of those hikes. We always had, if we had 2 trucks, we'd have 2 couples driving. For instance, Charlie was the driver and I was his wife. So when he was driving, I would sit in the front with him, get out of that wind that was blowing on the back. But we usually had 2 or 3 trucks, and Blanche and Stan Fredericks were a couple who drove one of the other trucks. And we always, Blanche and I always said, do you think you can get J.H. to ride in your truck this time so I can ride with Charlie? she and I were, because J.H. never rode in the back. He always rode with one of the drivers or the other. But when we got to where he took us, and we went wherever he took us, a lot of times it was to ball diamonds, city parks. We even went to county fairgrounds where we would set up our tents for the night, and J.H. would say, park the cars right here, I'll be back. As soon as I can, he'd come back, he'd say, throw off all the sleeping bags, we're going to stay here for the night. So we all threw off, got busy doing our thing. We had committees, a committee to build fires, committee to do the cooking, another committee to clean up the dishes. And every 3 days, you changed committee. So you didn't always stay on the purchasing committee to buy food or whatever. And we each would take care of our jobs, and J.H. would say, it's all work time, and the gals would say, it's cleaned up, Mr. Hauberg. It's okay, let's circle. So we all join hands, make a big circle. We would tell any adventure for the day if we chose to, then we would. We always said we always said the Lord's Prayer while we were holding hands in the circle, and then we would sing taps, and then we would say, "Thanks for the day, comrades." All put our hands in, and we did that. I think we were with the hiking club probably at least 100 times. And I have to tell you about these bandanas. We wore men's red handkerchiefs, you know those? Well, we would cut holes for the eyes, put one end up here, tie a knot in it, the other under our chin, tie a knot behind our heads, and eye holes. Well, I remember clearly, and we wore motorcycle caps. They were cloth, kind of like but they were motorcycles, but they were cloth. And you could fasten them under your chin so they didn't blow off in the wind. Because when you're going 50 miles an hour riding in the back of a truck, you have a lot of wind in you. And so this one time, somebody pounded on the roof of the truck, said, "We need a stop, we need a toilet." So J.D. said, "Okay, we'll stop." So we stopped at the filling station, and they put the gate down, so we all started quickly climbing out of the truck and off to the bathroom. And we were putting in gas, and the guy that owned the place said, "Where are they all going?" And Mr. Hauberg said, "They're going to the toilet." He said, no, they can't use my toilets. They look like a bunch of gypsies. And I don't want them in my toilet, which was an outhouse. And so J.A. said, "Come on, everybody. Hi-yi was what he always called. Get back on the truck. We're going." He shut off the gas. We paid the 50 cents worth of gas, and we took off, because he wasn't going to fill up that truck with gas from that man if he wouldn't let us use his toilet. But it was great fun. Thank you for listening.
Well, I think, I don't know about you guys, but I think this has exceeded my expectations very much. What do you all think? Before we go, I'd like to ask Linda Anderson to say a couple words about the Hauberg Gardens and these booklets that she brought.
We have these booklets about the Hauberg Gardens that are kind of circulated around. And I have to thank the family. Years ago, I was a pharmacist up on 18th Avenue in Rock Island, and I bought a house not very far from Hauberg, which I still live in this house. And Ada Mary Burke came in, and she was talking about being a little girl and going to that house. And she brought me pictures that she had from her photo album, and we made really rough photocopies back in those days. So I have these photocopies that aren't worth a whole lot now, except as memories to me. But that was the beginning of talking about Hauberg and the gardens. There are a lot of pictures of her out in the garden. One of the members here of the society, Jeannie Dasso, actually went to the Arboretum up by Chicago, and they actually gave her the glass plates, let her take them away from the Arboretum and make pictures from them. And those are the pictures that were used to put together this booklet and a slideshow we have about the actual construction of the gardens. I think we're real fortunate in the Quad Cities to have a couple, 2 or 3 actually, Jen Jensen projects. There's a couple in Davenport too. Just wanted to share that with you guys. And if you have a chance, feel free to go over. If you walk the gardens today, they don't quite look like the pictures. But part of our goal here was to draw attention to them. And hopefully someday there can be some reconstruction and they can be a little easier to walk. But thanks for including us today.
Just have happened to think of something which doesn't relate to John Hauberg at all, but it's rather funny. It's Louis Hauberg, his brother. And Louis went on a trip which included quite a bit of Africa, and I can't tell you when it was, maybe the late 1940s or early 1950s, quite a while back. And he took a lot of Kodachrome pictures, and he did a hiking club or an annual dinner. He was the speaker for an annual dinner, lots of people. Remember, in the 1950s, we were a little more conservative than we are today. Well, Louis was showing pictures that he had taken in Africa, and what just interesting but ordinary pictures. And then suddenly he called the next slide, please. And here were five or six bare-breasted African beauties looking right at the camera. Well, there was a big gasp from the audience like this, and Louis then said very quickly, "Next slide, please." And the next slide was that of something like a grain storage building, something like that. And Louis went into excruciating detail about this. It went on and on and on and on until you were ready to say, "Well, come on, Louis, get with it." And then he said, "Oh, I don't suppose you folks noticed, in that last slide, those women weren't wearing any shoes." When I talked with Jim Burke about this, and I said, Jack Benny's timing couldn't have been better than Louis'. And Jim said, well, he said, "This is the third time I've seen this, and each time his timing gets better."
Thank you all for coming today.
That picture was taken in 1912, that's because my mother was born in February.
Pretty good. Are these pictures all from here? Are these part of our collection?
I don't know if they are. Well, the glass.
That's when the parties Nothing. When did she